In October 1974, Frank Sinatra stopped mid-concert at Madison Square Garden, silenced his band, and told 42,000 confused fans, "There's someone here who means more to me than you'll ever know." When a mysterious woman in an elegant gown emerged from the shadows, someone nobody recognized, the arena fell into stunned silence as Frank's voice cracked with emotion. But who was this unknown woman that could make the king of the world drop his crown in front of thousands? And what did she give him that fame never could? October 13th, 1974. Madison Square Garden. The air inside is thick with blue-gray haze and expensive perfume, swirling under spotlights that cut through the darkness like searchlights. The massive crowd is packed into every seat, every tier, every corner of the arena, a sea of tuxedos and evening gowns stretching so far back that the faces blur into shadows. Above the stage, a banner reads, "Welcome Frank," in bold white letters, and beneath it stands the man himself. Frank Sinatra, 58 years old, looking every bit the legend in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. Black bow tie crisp against his white shirt, a pocket square folded with surgical precision. His hand wraps around the vintage microphone like he owns it, because he does. This is his main event concert, the crown jewel of his comeback tour, after a brief retirement that the world refused to accept. They wanted him back. They needed him back. And here he is, delivering exactly what they came for. The voice, the swagger, the untouchable cool of a man who's seen it all and conquered twice. The orchestra behind him is tight, professional, every musician locked into the rhythm like a well-oiled machine. Brass sections gleam under the lights, their instruments catching and reflecting the glow like jewels. The drummer keeps perfect time, never rushing, never dragging, the foundation upon which everything else is built. Frank moves across the circular stage with the ease of someone who's done this 10,000 times, working the crowd with a raised eyebrow here, a sly grin there, his timing impeccable. The audience eats it up. They laugh when he jokes, they sigh when he croons. They're completely under his spell, lost in the fantasy of being this close to greatness. Women in the front rows lean forward in their seats, diamonds glittering at their throats. Men in the balconies raise their glasses in silent tribute. This is what they paid for, the full Sinatra experience, the chance to say they were there when the chairman of the board held court. But something's different tonight. Between songs, during the moments when he'd normally banter or sip his Jack Daniels with theatrical flair, Frank's eyes drift toward the shadowed backstage area, toward something or someone hidden from view. It's subtle, almost imperceptible, but the seasoned musicians in the orchestra notice. The conductor glances back, confused, his baton hovering in midair. Frank's manager, watching from the side with a clipboard and headset, shifts uncomfortably. This isn't in the script. This isn't in the rundown that was rehearsed down to the second. The show is supposed to flow like water, one song into the next, jokes timed perfectly, encores planned to seem spontaneous. But Frank keeps glancing backstage, and each time he does, something in his expression changes, softens maybe, or hardens with resolve. The crowd doesn't see it yet. They're too busy being dazzled, too intoxicated by the sheer spectacle of Sinatra, live to notice the small crack forming in the performance. But it's there, a hesitation, a wait. Frank finishes, "I've got you under my skin," to thunderous applause, his voice wrapping around the final note with the kind of control that comes from decades of mastery. The audience roars their approval, demanding more, always more. But instead of launching into the next number, instead of riding that wave of adulation the way he always does, Frank freezes in place. The microphone hangs loose in his hand. The lights catch the lines in his face, deeper now than they were a decade ago, etched by years of living hard and fast, by late nights and early mornings, by love affairs that burned bright and crashed hard, by the weight of being Frank Sinatra every single day of his life. For just a moment, the armor slips. The crowd roars, oblivious, demanding more. Frank looks out at them, at the thousands of faces expecting him to be the king, the voice, the legend, and something flickers behind his blue eyes, not fear, not doubt, a quality rarely seen, something human. The band waits, instruments ready. The audience waits, hungry for the next song. And Frank Sinatra, standing alone in a circle of light before the sea of faces, makes a decision that will break every rule of showmanship he's ever known. Frank Sinatra has spent the last 30 years building an empire out of his own mythology. The world sees the penthouse suites in New York and Los Angeles, the private jets that ferry him from coast to coast, the Rat Pack parties in Las Vegas that became the stuff of legend, the string of beautiful women photographed on his arm, the sold-out arenas night after night. They see the man who bounced back from career death in the early 50s, when the voice gave out, when the movie roles dried up, when Columbia Records dropped him, and the critics wrote him off as yesterday's news, only to claw his way back to become bigger than ever. An Oscar for From Here to Eternity, countless Grammys, albums that defined an era, the respect of presidents and mob bosses alike. Frank Sinatra became more than a singer. He became an idea, a symbol, the embodiment of American confidence and cool. But what they don't see, what they can't see from their seats in Madison Square Garden, is the toll, the cost of being that symbol every waking moment. At 58, Frank's voice isn't what it was in 1943 when Bobby Soxers fainted at the Paramount Theater, when he was the skinny kid with the bow tie who made teenage girls scream just by breathing into a microphone. The high notes require more effort now, more careful preparation. The breath control isn't as effortless as it once was. He has to choose his spots, conserve energy, rely on phrasing and interpretation more than raw power. He knows it. The critics know it, though most are too respectful to say it outright. And in the age of Led Zeppelin and Elton John, of rock and roll dominating the airwaves and disco beginning its conquest of the dance floors, some wonder if the Sinatra era is finally over. A relic of a bygone generation, clinging to relevance through sheer force of will and nostalgia. The comeback tour was supposed to silence those doubts. And it has, mostly. The tickets sold out in hours, proving that people still want to see him, still want to be in his presence. The reviews have been respectful, even glowing in some cases. But Frank feels the weight differently now. It's not about proving he can still sing. It's about asking himself why he's still doing this. What's left to prove? Who's left to impress? The entourage backstage treats him like royalty, but royalty is lonely. They say yes to everything, laugh at every joke, anticipate his every need, but none of them really know him. His marriage to Mia Farrow imploded years ago. The age difference and lifestyle clash too much to overcome. His kids are grown, living their own lives, carrying their own complicated feelings about having Frank Sinatra as a father. The Rat Pack is scattered now, aging, some gone. Dean Martin drinks too much, the humor turning darker. Sammy Davis Jr. is fighting his own battles against racism and addiction. The parties aren't as fun anymore. The spotlight, once intoxicating, now feels like a cage made of gold. Beautiful, valuable, but still a cage. Lately, in the quiet hours before dawn, when sleep won't come, and the pills don't help, and the bottle sits empty on the nightstand, Frank's mind drifts back. Not to the Copacabana or the Capitol Records sessions, or the night he won the Oscar that saved his career. Further back, past the fame, past the mythology, to Hoboken. To the cramped apartment on Monroe Street, where his mother Dolly ruled with an iron fist and his father Marty tended bar and barely spoke. To the streets where being Italian meant being less than, where dreams were luxuries poor kids couldn't afford, where the future looked like working the docks or driving a truck if you were lucky. And to the people, the few precious people, who saw something in skinny little Francis before the world knew his name. People who gave without expecting anything back. People who believed in him when belief was the only currency they had to offer, when there was no reason to think this particular kid would amount to anything more than any other kid on any other block in any other working-class neighborhood in America. Tonight, standing backstage before the show with his managers and handlers buzzing around him like nervous bees, Frank made a decision that everyone advised against. He invited one of those people here, had her flown in from New Jersey, put up in a nice hotel, brought to the arena in a car. She's here now, waiting in the wings, terrified and confused about why Frank Sinatra, the Frank Sinatra, would want her on his stage in front of this massive audience. But Frank knows exactly why. Because all those people came to see a legend tonight, and he's about to show them the truth that nobody talks about. The truth that gets buried under the mythology and the headlines and the carefully constructed image. that legends are built on the backs of ordinary people who did extraordinary things when nobody was watching, when there were no cameras, no reporters, no one to applaud or award or even acknowledge the kindness. The band is 3 bars into My Way when Frank raises his hand. The gesture is small, almost casual, but every musician on that stage knows what it means. The trumpets trail off mid-phrase. The piano's last chord hangs in the air like a question mark. The conductor's baton freezes. And suddenly, Madison Square Garden, a building designed to contain noise, built for roaring crowds and explosive energy, falls into a silence so complete you could hear a pin drop from the rafters. Every soul in that arena collectively holds their breath, confused, waiting. Frank steps away from his mark on the circular stage, the microphone cord dragging behind him like a lifeline. He's done this 1,000,000 times, stopped mid-song to tell a joke, to take a drink, to needle someone in the front row. But this isn't that. His face has changed. The swagger is gone. The untouchable cool has evaporated. What's left is raw vulnerability, an unguarded moment, a side the audience has never witnessed before. "Ladies and gentlemen," Frank says, and his voice, that instrument the world knows so well, one that can fill any room without effort, comes out softer than usual, almost gentle. "There's someone here tonight I need you to meet." He extends his hand beyond the curtain, toward the darkness beyond the lights. The audience stirs, heads crane. Whispers ripple through the rows like wind through wheat. A spotlight operator, catching on instinctively, swings his beam into the darkness. And then she appears. A woman, elegant and refined, steps into the circle of light. She's wearing a dark gown with a modest neckline, the fabric catching the stage lights with a subtle sheen. Her hair is styled in a short, practical wave, gray now with age, and at her collar sits an ornate brooch that looks like it's been polished 1,000 times. Her hands are gloved, and one reaches out tentatively, hesitantly, toward Frank's extended palm, like she's not quite sure this is real, not quite convinced she belongs here. The crowd doesn't recognize her. Why would they? She's not famous, not a movie star, not a singer, not anyone they've ever seen in a magazine or on a television screen. Confusion spreads through the audience like fog. Some people glance at their neighbors, silently asking if anyone knows who this is. The woman takes another step, and now you can see it. The nervousness, the vulnerability. The way her shoulders are slightly hunched, as if she's trying to make herself smaller, less visible, despite standing before thousands upon thousands of strangers. Frank crosses the stage to meet her, takes her gloved hand in his and steadies her. His thumb brushes the back of her hand, a gesture so small, so intimate, that it shouldn't register from the cheap seats, but somehow everyone feels it anyway. "This is Mrs. Adelaide," Frank says, and now emotion bleeds through his tone, unmistakably. The chairman of the board, the man who never shows weakness, who built a career on control and precision and never letting them see you sweat, has an audible waver in his voice that betrays everything. He guides her toward center stage, toward the grand piano that's been sitting there all night as a prop, and positions her gently beside it. "She was my first piano teacher in Hoboken when I was just a kid, when my family didn't have 2 nickels to rub together." He pauses, swallows hard, and the microphone picks up the sound. "She taught me for free, every week, never asked for a dime. She's the reason I know music isn't about notes on a page. It's about—" He stops, can't finish. His eyes are wet. The audience doesn't know what to do. No one planned for this. This wasn't what they expected. They came for New York, New York, and Fly Me to the Moon, and the fantasy of Sinatra in his element, untouchable and cool. They didn't come for this, for vulnerability, for truth, for the man behind the legend standing exposed under the lights. But something is happening, something is shifting. One person stands, then another, then a whole section. Then the entire arena rises as one. 42,000 people on their feet. And the ovation that rises isn't the usual showbiz applause, the polite appreciation for entertainment. This is something else. This is recognition. This is witnessing something sacred. As the thunder of recognition fills the arena, Frank remains motionless, her hand still in his, letting the applause wash over them both. She's crying now, openly, her free hand pressed to her mouth, as if trying to hold back the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. Frank leans close, says something only she can hear, and she nods, laughing through her tears. The audience slowly settles back into their seats, but the energy in the room has fundamentally changed. The performance is over. What's happening now is an entirely different experience, more real, more human, more important than any song could ever be. Frank turns back to the microphone, but he doesn't step away from her. He keeps her hand in his, anchoring her to the stage, to this moment. "You know," he says, his voice steadier now, but still soft, still intimate despite the packed arena hanging on every word. "When I was 10 years old, I would walk past Mrs. Adelaide's house every day after school. I'd hear piano music coming from inside, and I'd stop on the sidewalk and just listen. One day she came out and caught me standing there, like some little street urchin, and you know what she did?" He looks at her, smiling through his own tears. "She invited me in, sat me down at her piano, put my fingers on the keys, and she said, 'Francis, you've got music in you. I can hear it. But music isn't something you learn from a book. It's something you feel.'" Mrs. Adelaide's hand quivers in his. Frank squeezes it gently. "My mother couldn't pay for lessons. We barely had enough for food. But Mrs. Adelaide didn't care. Every Thursday after school for 2 years, she taught me. Scales, chords, how to read music, how to listen, really listen to what a song is trying to say. She never asked for anything, never expected anything. She just gave." His words falter again. "And when I told her I wanted to sing instead of play piano, you know what she did? She didn't get mad. She didn't tell me I was wasting her time. She smiled and said, 'Then sing, Francis.' But remember, the piano taught you something. It taught you that music comes from here." He touches his chest, right over his heart. The arena is silent again, but it's a different silence now. Not confusion, not anticipation, something deeper, something reverent. Frank turns to Mrs. Adelaide. "Would you play something for us?" he asks. And there's a vulnerability in the question that makes it clear he's not asking as Frank Sinatra, the myth made flesh. He's asking as Francis, the 10-year-old kid from Hoboken, who used to stand outside her window and dream. She hesitates, shakes her head slightly. "No, I couldn't possibly." But Frank guides her gently to the piano bench. The spotlight follows her. She sits, her gloved hands hovering over the keys like she's afraid to touch them, afraid this might all be a dream. Then, slowly, carefully, her fingers find their place. She plays. The melody is simple, almost childlike. Nothing fancy, nothing showy, just a gentle progression of chords that sounds like it belongs in a different era, a simpler time. Frank kneels beside her, the microphone still in his hand. And he begins to sing. Not the polished professional Sinatra that the world knows, something raw, more fragile. He falters on certain notes, wavers on others, but it doesn't matter. He's not performing anymore. He's just a man singing to the woman who taught him that music is about feeling, not perfection. The song, some old standard from the 1930s that most people in the audience don't even recognize, becomes the most powerful thing any of them have ever heard. When the last note fades, when Mrs. Adelaide's fingers lift from the keys and the sound dies in the vast space of Madison Square Garden, nobody moves, nobody breathes. Then hands come together, not the usual roar, but something slower, deeper, building like a wave. People aren't just clapping, they're wiping their eyes, they're holding each other. They're experiencing something they didn't expect when they bought their tickets. The truth that greatness isn't about being untouchable. It's about remembering the hands that lifted you when you had nothing. Frank helps Mrs. Adelaide to her feet, supports her as they walk slowly off stage together. She leans into him, whispers something that makes him smile through his tears, and he nods. At the wings, he kisses her hand one more time, a gesture so old-fashioned, so formal, so full of genuine reverence that it feels like something from another world. Then she disappears into the darkness, back to the anonymity she's always known, and Frank returns to the stage alone. The name everyone knows, the King. But different now, smaller somehow, but also bigger, more human, but also more transcendent. He picks up the microphone, wipes his eyes with the back of his hand, and looks out at 42,000 faces. "Thank you," he says simply. The band starts up again, the show continues, but everyone in Madison Square Garden knows they've just witnessed something that transcends entertainment, something they'll carry with them for the rest of their lives. They came to see a legend perform. Instead, they watched a man remember. And in that remembering, Frank Sinatra gave them the most important lesson of his entire career: that true greatness isn't measured by how high you climb, but by whether you remember to reach back down for the people who believed in you first, when belief was all they had to give.